Good morning. Good morning to survivors of narcissistic and abusive personalities. It's Wednesday again. Man, these weeks just seem to fly by, don't they? Today we're going to talk about emotional incest. I know it's an icky term. It feels weird saying it. It's gross. Emotional incest, right? But I'm going to explain it in a way that makes it a little more palatable. And hopefully someday they'll come up with a different term for it. It's kind of technical, and I'm going to explain why here in just a second. Emotional incest is something that takes place in enmeshed family systems or codependent family systems. Enmeshed family systems usually occur when you have a parent or family member who is ill or addicted, mentally ill, untreated, and instead of addressing those issues, the family system just sort of forms around the sick person and teaches codependent patterns, behaviors, beliefs to the family members as they sort of support the sickness of the addicted person or the sick person. And, you'll have an enabling figure who, teaches everyone else how to caretake the sick person and how to tiptoe around the sick person. Let's not upset your father. Your dad had a couple beers, so let's, keep it down out here, right? Or something like, your father loves you. I know that he doesn't show it in the ways like I do, but, he tells me when you're not around, he lets me know how much he loves you. So you'll have an enabling parental figure who even compensates for the shortcomings of the sick parent. Okay. Enmeshment means that we're all up in each other's business. And things that are not actually someone's business, it's sort of a free-for-all. So you'll have a family system where the individuals don't have their own autonomous lives. They're very much interconnected and supporting each other in ways that makes them have to rely on each other, but not in a healthy way, okay? Not in a healthy way. There's no boundaries. And in that kind of a family system, it invites the type of dynamic where we're giving our 2 cents and opinions on things that are really, truly none of our business. An enmeshed family system is going to cause people to not be able to move forward through regular life cycle type stages, right? Because when you're enmeshed, you feel like that you can't leave that system and that you have to maintain your role within that system, because if you don't, the system will fail, or the sick person will be sad, or the sick person will commit suicide, or the sick person will relapse, right? Okay, so emotional incest is a form of emotional and psychological abuse that takes place in enmeshed codependent family systems. I hope that was clear, okay? And it makes the child take a role that is not appropriate for a child. So it's sort of like a parent is going to turn one of the children into their spouse. So that means they're talking to them about things that are intimate, that shouldn't be discussed with the child, adult issues. It means that when that parent is feeling lonely, they're going to seek the child out for companionship, but in a way that doesn't allow the child to have their own life. It winds up with, you wind up with children that feel responsible for the emotional well-being of their parents. They have to be checking on the parent. They're answering the parent's texts very quickly. They're feeling like they can't go out with their friends because they don't want to leave the parent alone. It stops the child from having their own life and from engaging in those typical developmental phases and stages. Abusive and manipulative parents, you remember we've talked about how narcissism needs to be fed, right? Narcissism seeks food. It seeks fuel. And what fuels narcissism is attention and emotion. So narcissistic, abusive, and manipulative parents feed off of their children in a similar way that abusive, manipulative, and toxic romantic partner will feed off of the empathic partner. It fuels them, right? They love attention and they love emotion. They love your sympathy. They love you to listen to them and affirm them and be cheerleader and co-sign all their stuff and never criticize them, right? So people who can't take responsibility for their own behaviors, people who need that sort of, they can't take any criticism, right? So that is going to be fueled by a child who feels responsible for boosting the parent's mood and making sure they're mentally and emotionally okay. So the parent is actually depleting the child's resources of attention, time, emotion, and also stunting the child and preventing the child from making outside meaningful relationships, and from moving on in life. So, for example, the leaving the nest and cutting of the cord stages are very, very, very difficult for everyone in the family system. So if someone's getting ready to go off to college or move out of the house or, get married and move away, the child feels like they can't explore their own life path. They have to stay close to home, or they can't go live somewhere else. Now, if you're a child, if you think about this, how would it make you feel when your parent is treating you like an adult? Well, on one hand, it makes you feel special. It makes you feel mature. It makes you feel trusted and like that you're in on, the adult world, which as a child is a very enticing and attractive thing. But then it becomes very confusing for the child. It causes cognitive dissonance when the parent goes from, you're my best friend, now you're my child. You're my best friend, now you're my child. So which is it? Am I a grown-up mom or am I a child? On one moment, you're telling me about sex with your new boyfriend, right? And you told me about his penis even. Now you're saying I have to eat my vegetables. And for a child, that's very confusing and can cause anxiety and a lot of other issues. And it also gives the impression that, if you want to continue to be treated special, then, you must comply and put up with, things that you don't want to do, right? So in other words, I'm going to scream at you. As a parent, I'm going to scream at you and say, don't dress like a slut when you go out, make sure that you're not dressed like a whore when you go to that party, because as a narcissistic, enmeshed, emotionally incestuous parent, I'm trying to guilt the child, mischaracterize the child so that if they do try to go do some fun things, that they automatically just feel bad and icky about it, right? But then in the next breath, I'm best friends with that child because it makes me feel better. If I'm a narcissistic, abusive, manipulative parent who needs to be fueled by the attention and time and emotion of their child, I'm going to want to get that as much as I possibly can. So now I'm going to manipulate that child into feeling guilty so that they don't go and try to do other things or make new relationships. Let's see. Another term for this is covert incest. Okay, so you got emotional incest, covert incest. Again, these are types of incest that does not involve the actual act of molestation or sex acts themselves. But covert incest can be a father who comments on his daughter's body in a sexual way but never actually touches her. Covert incest can also happen as parents discuss or expose their children to sexual things that are inappropriate or psychologically damaging. It can also be, for example, like the child doesn't have privacy in the bathroom. People just walk in and out of the bathroom. The child doesn't have privacy. Constantly walking in on each other naked or walking around naked. And being very open sexually and thinking, that maybe misunderstanding and thinking as a parent that you're doing something healthy by not stigmatizing sex, but you're sharing sexual things with a child when it's not appropriate for them developmentally can cause trauma. And it also creates a sick sort of bond with that parent. Because those experiences leave an imprint on the brain. So this is what it looks like on the inside of those sorts of family systems. So it's covert incest, it's emotional incest. Again, this is when a parent places a child in an adult role in a way that catapults that child into a developmental role that they haven't achieved yet. So they're not an adult. They're not a partner or a spouse. They're not a best friend, peer, they're a child or they're a teenager. And so parents who are sick mentally, they're addicted, they are untreated, they're unhealthy, they're lonely, going through divorce, feeling like they've been wronged by their spouse, that parent will then turn to the child and look to the child to fuel them and to make them feel better, essentially. Another thing that goes on in emotional incest or covert incest is the toxic parent. Let's say there's a divorce happening. The toxic parent will start to use more of those tactics to draw the child in and then poison them against the healthier parent. So the child feels, and I've seen this actually not too long ago, and it was a father and son. So it can happen with mothers and daughters. It can happen with fathers and daughters. It can happen, across the gender lines, right? If it's fathers and daughters, a lot of times they talk to their daughter like a girlfriend. Hi, baby. Or, oh, I saw your picture on Facebook and you're such a beautiful woman, but she's only 12. I love how you look in those jeans. You have very shapely legs. Boy, you sure are bursting out of that top. So that's what a father might say to a daughter. But a father to son thing that recently occurred had to do with, the narcissistic father. The son is setting boundaries with the narcissistic father, and the father starts then treating the son as if he's a grown man, which, is an older child, but still like peers, and then also basically inviting that child to drink underage drinking, or illegal substances. Like, in other words, if you want to do those things, you can come over to my apartment and do them. As this narcissistic father is dealing with the fact that his family has decided they don't want to have contact with him anymore because of his bad behaviors and because of his narcissism, then he's going to use all these different tactics to try to draw the kids back to him. And like I said, including that sort of inappropriate peer relationship, saying, not only are you a peer, but also come over here, you can do bad things and I won't tell anybody. I won't tell your mom. And then if that son were to actually do that, then he feels closer to his father. So then when the father's saying things to the son like, your mom had an affair, or your mom is a sick woman and needs to be on medication, there's two sides of the story, and I'm sure your mother hasn't told you both sides. And by that time, he's got the ear of the child now, because he's letting the child drink at his apartment, possibly even bringing girls there to have sex and being cool with that, just so that the sick parent can lure the child in and kind of put them in a position of having to choose sides. So that's part of what goes on with that emotional incest is, we're about to be picking sides here if it's a divorce. But it could be the divorcee who actually is not a toxic parent, but they haven't done work on themselves to recover from their own trauma. So let's say I'm a survivor of abuse and I haven't dealt with my issues, which means that I'm not dating in a healthy way and I'm not maintaining social support with healthy people. And so now I feel lonely. And also I don't feel like investing in new relationships or spending the time and energy on that. So since I'm going to sort of keep to myself, it seems attractive to lean on your child, and to try to develop a friendship with them. And so there's those situations too where it is perfectly innocent and no one's trying to manipulate anybody. But if you were raised in an enmeshed family system and you've never known that or addressed it, furthermore, you're a survivor of something that's untreated, it's really truly an innocent thing for some people to try to seek closeness with their child, and they don't realize that it's not appropriate to be close with their child in that way. So I want to, give a little bit of grace here, because I know there are some parents that do this and they don't even realize they're doing it, and they're not toxic parents. But then, down at the other end of the spectrum, you have very manipulative, abusive, brainwashing, psychological warfare, really nasty parents who can molest the children without ever touching them, is basically what this comes down to. And the kids will have that uh-oh feeling about this parent, even though no one's ever laid a hand, it still leaves a mark. Let me make sure, like I always do, that I haven't missed anything here. Yeah, so, talking about sex in this sort of, very graphic or inappropriate way in front of the child, drawing a child into sexual conversations that aren't appropriate, flirtation with the child, and then talking about body parts. Talking about if it's a young woman, talking about like her period and calling attention to that. Let's see. Yeah. So in families where there's divorce, separation, addiction, mental health issues, that's where you'll see this sort of thing going on. And then what happens when this child grows up? What happens if you were raised in this and then on with you? And your parent did this. Usually you wind up feeling kind of stuck, especially if the parent is still alive and it's still going on. You've got some caretaking, empathic individuals who will anchor themselves to a sick parent, and believe that it's virtuous for them to completely deplete their resources, lose their identity, and stay stuck in their life and sacrifice for that parent. And to them, that's perfectly normal, and that's what you're supposed to do as a good child. If you want to be a good son or a good daughter, this is what you do. You sacrifice yourself, your own life trajectory, your dreams and goals, your relationships, in order to appease and to feed and fuel this parent who has not been able to establish their own life outside of their child. Somebody who has experienced this can have difficulties with relationships later on in life because they mistake enmeshment and codependence as love. That sort of sick closeness where we're, like I've said all up in each other's business, that is what love looks like. That's what familial love looks like. That's what a romantic love looks like. So then now we're going to have difficulties with relationships, and possibly an ongoing pattern of toxic and abusive relationships. Then if you believe that love and what love feels like is actually a codependent, enmeshed, emotionally incestuous relationship, then when that occurs in the future, you see that as normal and you're familiar with it. And then furthermore, you have a lot of shame because of what you've been through, and you will tell yourself that you don't really deserve anything different and that those other types of relationships aren't for you. So you'll see that sort of repeating pattern as people mistake this type of relationship as love. Okay, that's it for emotional incest. Not a fun topic, but an important one nonetheless, especially since this is something that's very private, goes on behind closed doors, nobody ever talks about it. And when it's a parent and child relationship, we have so many cultural norms and expectations that this is a conversation that we just don't have, because you only have one set of parents, right? You only have one mom, you only have one dad. And so, let's appreciate our parents and that the natural stages of leaving the nest, at least in our culture, the natural stages of becoming autonomous and independent are actually looked at like selfishness, like that you're turning your back on people, that you think you're better than people, that you're the hard ass, you'll be, you're the heavy, because you've chosen to not continue with the enmeshed family system. You'll be mischaracterized for doing that. So that's another indicator, is when you just try to do normal life stuff, they make you feel like crap about it. Okay, I'll end here. And if you have any questions about emotional incest or anything else related to our SNAP topics, as always, you can private message me, shoot me an email, go to our website to contact me if you want to. You can also text me. I have my phone number on our website. You can text me anytime and ask me questions. Okay, have a good day. Bye.